Well, I was actually already involved with the horses before Barbara and I met. I was living in Minnesota at the time and running a 45-acre piece of property that I had a couple of pleasure horses on that I used for trail riding just in the local area and on my property. And a girl that I was seeing at the time convinced me to go out one Saturday and visit the Renaissance Festival outside of Minneapolis with her and her cousin. And she basically wound up dragging me out there kicking and screaming. Basically because it wasn't anything that I thought that I would be interested in. And after spending 2.5 hours in traffic to get to the front gate, I was convinced I was going to be even less interested. And we did the tour of the grounds and looked at the handbags and the pots and sampled some of the wares. And at the very back part of the fair, at that time they had a 1.5 mile racetrack that was set up a dirt track. And their policy then was that anybody that was interested could bring their personal horse in on the weekend and could compete, and wound up, picking up about $75 in prize money. So on the whole, I came out ahead for the weekend and thought that was really, really an extraordinarily pleasant way to spend the weekend. So they were looking for 6 riders and 6 horses that they could depend on to show up every weekend. And I wound up actually being hired as an alternate. And I'd bring my horse out again on the weekend and be paid a small stipend to be involved in the different events. And they also paid some prize money to first, second, and third, so you could pad what you were being paid. And I wound up making enough to basically cover my hay bill for the winter. The jousting is intriguing. It's interesting. I found it fascinating when we first started fleshing this out and working out the process for building the armor and the horse costuming and doing the research about the different types of jousting and then deciding on which era we wanted to be most actively involved in. And like I say, it's still interesting, but the overriding interest there was that this was some way to be able to do the festivals, which I already enjoyed doing, and be able to involve the horses into what I was doing. Yeah, well, this goes back thousands of years. There's basically nothing new under the sun. Xenophon was writing thousands of years ago that it was necessary to be aware of what was happening with the horse and react in accordance to what their emotions and what their physical abilities were capable of, and develop that partnership and actually help the horse to basically enjoy and take some pride in what it is that they're doing. And that's all been added to and elaborated on, and maybe over the course of the last 30 years it's been defined more accurately, but there is a lot more attention paid now to getting the horses to really be willing participants and get them to take some satisfaction in what they're doing as well. Both from the pragmatic standpoint that you ultimately get a better performance, and from the more humane aspect that now you've got a horse that you're working with that is actively enjoying what's going on and is wanting to be involved in it as much as you are. It can't be a master-slave situation. You've got to, again, to get something that's worth having, have that willing cooperation. You can do an imitation. Which for the vast majority of the people that are watching, they're not going to be aware that that horse really isn't comfortable being involved in what's going on, or isn't doing it in any kind of a competent way. They're smashing their way through things and being very uncoordinated and out of balance, but they're still getting from point A to point B, so no big deal. Whereas somebody that might be a little more conversant with what's going on and more knowledgeable, saying that horse is really doing a clumsy job of it, mostly from miscommunication and being out of time with each other. They're just not working together. And again, from our point, you've got both the pragmatic and the humane aspects. Is that it really is not comfortable for a guy that's already encumbered in some very top-heavy, very uncomfortable armor to have to be dealing with a horse that isn't wanting to be involved with what's going on. There are horses that have a lot of inborn confidence. There are horses that have a greater degree of innate trust in what you're doing to look out for their well-being, and there are horses that are more timid or lacking in confidence that require more time to reassure and help them through until they're sure in their own minds that this is something that's not going to cause any unnecessary injury to them or any undue anxiety, because that will follow up a performance as well as the horse that really is not wanting to be out there. Probably one of the worst situations you can be involved in a competitive jousting experience is having to fight with your horse if you're having to fight with your opponent at the same time. The horses are individuals, and you basically have to go at their pace with what they're comfortable accepting and what they're ready to accept. You also have to take into consideration that they have different physical abilities. Some have got strong areas and weak areas, and you can encourage the strong areas, and you can also develop exercises and drills and whatnot to help bolster some of those weaker areas and bring them up to a higher level. But there are reasonable limits there where there are horses that are just not capable of doing what some other horses don't have any problem with. And you're going to have to work with that, and that applies both on a physical and on an emotional and a mental level, where there are some horses that are able to deal with a lot more excitement and a lot more stress and still be able to maintain their confidence. And there are horses that need to be constantly reassured and looked out for. That's just something that they're more dependent on. So you have to take that into account in what you're asking them to do. The horses that have more natural athletic ability, we will try to nurture and again, for their satisfaction as much as yours. You can get the horses just like you can the riders to a basic level of competence where they can go through and they can do a show, and nobody's going to be dissatisfied with what they see out there. But if I'm riding the horse, then I'm going to notice that this horse is basically just going through the motions and really isn't interested in doing any more than they absolutely have to, whereas there are horses that like to be challenged and again get an inner satisfaction from that improvement that they're showing and that ability that they're developing, and want to be able to show it off. And those are the more interesting horses to work with. Horses aren't motorcycles where you can say that you're going to throttle with 3 pounds of pressure per square inch, and the clutch has to be gauged and released in just this sequence, and with just this amount of pressure and release and whatnot, and that you're going to get the desired result over and over and over. When you're involved with horsemanship, that only works to a degree. Because you've got another semi-sentient being there that's involved with what's going on, and they've got feelings and emotions and abilities and lack of abilities that all have to be taken into account.
I came to this company in 1999, the summer of, I think, if I remember right. It's been a while, so I've been hit a bunch since then. Came to the company not knowing anything and really interested in the jousting, and from, I guess a competitive aspect, but also historical aspect, because I was an uber nerd and read history books and played with swords and watched Errol Flynn movies and Douglas Fairbanks and, all the classics, and I was really always interested about it. And I watched these guys perform at a fair in Fort Lauderdale, and was just blown away by the fact that they jousted for real, and just thought it was the coolest thing, and really wanted to figure out how to get involved and be a part of it. And I didn't meet Kelly until almost a year into my career with the company, because at the time I joined on, they were in California and the guys I was with were in Ohio. So I didn't meet Kelly until I got here, and then Barbara showed me tapes of Kelly competing in reining shows with Dolly, and I saw that and I went, I want to do that. I got very lucky in that this company actually teaches real horse technique. It's not made up, what I like to call whip, spur, and jerk, or just, where you grab the horse by their mouth, pull them around, kick them on the sides, and now we're going to go somewhere, and all that. So, there's actually technique, there's a point, there's direction, that, you're really trying to refine skills to create a willing partnership, as opposed to, you're going to do because I say so, or whatever.
Or underneath the armor?
Just a padded arming coat is what goes on underneath the armor. Nothing more than that. I mean, I'll wear pads to help, like elbow pads, knee pads, certain types of supports to help, wrist brace. But yeah, I mean, other than that, nothing serious. The armor itself is about 140 pounds. My first suit was that was 130 pounds. That was based off of German Gothic styling. It wasn't replicated after one piece specifically. The breastplate was like a pot belly, we call it. The spaldrons or the pauldrons, the shoulder pieces, were taken and modeled after a piece I saw in the Cleveland Museum of Art. The arms were modeled after some pieces, but not exactly. They were done in the artistic styling of. Same thing with the legs. They were done in the very Gothic, German Gothic style, which is, I guess, a preference that I have. My second suit, which is the one I wear currently, is 140 pounds, and that's modeled after German Gothic. But same thing, it's not modeled after an exact historical piece. It's done in the style of. So the guy that makes our armor is really, really talented. So, I can talk to him about, artistic flair and let him put his creativity into it. I gave him some concept ideas and he ran with it. And again, he's really, really good at what he does. So he's probably, I'd say right now, is probably one of the absolute best. To get in the suit, it takes about 10 minutes, if that. If I can do it in 5 if I absolutely have to. If I have somebody helping me, yeah, I can do it in about 5. If it's me by myself, about 10. The artistic flair is for aesthetics and to look good. But yeah, and it's also functionality. I'm not going to put on just a piece of like tin foil because it looks pretty. If it's not going to protect me, I'm not going to put it on. We don't get the luxury of playing around like that. Everything that we put on has to function, has to protect us, because if it doesn't, we're done. The armor that we have for the horses is made of stainless steel. It's an easier keep, but also it's a lighter gauge, and so like a piece of mild steel at 16 gauge is going to be a little bit heavier. I can get a piece of stainless at 18 gauge that's going to have the same strength, but also be a little bit lighter. So we do that. As far as the style, I wouldn't say a prescribed style. I mean, we make sure the faceplate can cover them entirely. They have something for their neck, and they have something for the chest. It's for show, but also for practicality purposes to help protect them should they ever need it. And it has happened, that they get hit with something on accident, and the armor protects them, and life goes on. Well, I train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is a grappling art, which is great for my cardio and strength and conditioning. And I Lindy hop for fun, not as much as I used to, but it's something that I enjoy doing. So, I like being physically active, but I don't like working out. Like, I'm not a weightlifter guy, and the CrossFit stud I'm not really interested in. My father was more practical in the sense of you work your job, you build your nest egg, and you go and then you live out your retirement in happiness. And I'm like, well, that's great. Doesn't work for me. So traveling around, living the gypsy lifestyle, it doesn't work for him. But the best compliment I ever got paid was, he's like, you know what? I couldn't do what you do. I can't function that way, but you do it. You're really successful at it, and you've done a good job at it. So, I'm proud of you, kind of thing. And it was like that for me and my dad, it was a pretty big moment. My mom thinks it's cool. I mean, she's got pictures of me all over the house, and, enjoys telling people what I do. And especially when they go, what does he do? So, they both like it just fine. My sister and my brother seem to think it's fun. My brother actually used to squire for me every now and again, so we used to have a good time together. Almost convinced him to come try this, but he actually did the smart, responsible thing and got a real job, and now he's one of the big managers over at the Strauss Center in Tampa. So
how does your girlfriend feel about you traveling around? Does she do it with you, or is this something?
She travels with me. She actually makes potter or ceramics, sculptures and whatnot. Also does like a bunch of other like special effects and props and things of that sort. So she's been able to travel and has enjoyed seeing things and doing stuff. And she's looking to open up a booth and be able to travel in that regard. Because again, I'm kind of in the twilight of my time where this is wear and tear. It's what comes with the territory. So. I can't keep up at the rate that I should. Again, I'm sore, stiff, all that stuff. So, I'm looking to shift gears. So, I'll probably still be around in some capacity or another, training horses, training guys, performing every now and again, just not maybe traveling so heavily. But, so right now I got the benefit that she comes with me, which not always the easiest thing, but, we haven't killed each other yet, so I call that good. Jousting's been around at least for 20, 30 years now, and every company has different ways of doing it and this and that. I mean, it's probably a couple hundred guys in the country that have done forms of jousting in one way or the other. Probably, maybe 150 full contact guys. Again, that's just really broad numbers. I don't even know how accurate they are. I know that there are several teams that engage in full contact and they train guys to get in the saddle and take hits and all that stuff, but they don't stick with it. Like, to me, they're hobby jousters, where, I'm going to show up on this weekend, this once or 2 months a year, and it'll be great and it'll be fantastic, where this is what I do every day. This is my life. 41 weekends out of a year, we're performing, and traveling and training and doing all kinds of stuff. So, I'm probably one of the very few that have made an honest living and career out of it. That's probably just a handful of guys, maybe 50 guys that have gone. And in this company, I think I'm the one that's lasted the longest as far as non-stop jousting, and that's all I do. Like I've only had like maybe a 6-month period where I wasn't actively jousting, and that's because I thought I was done for a while because I was married, and then it all changed, and so I came back out to where people were good to be around. So. Yeah, it's probably safe to say that I'm probably the only one that has gone this long, being this kind of a full contact jouster and being this active. It's great being out in front of the crowd and being the center of attention. I really enjoy doing things that I'm confident in saying that nobody else in their right mind will ever do and probably can do. So I mean, there's just a lot of things, but probably the performance aspect of it is probably top up there, being out in front of people and getting to do stuff that a very small group can actually do. So that's always pretty fun and exciting. Yeah, and the hits and the competition of it is great, and turning in good performances are great, so there's lots of little stuff, I guess. I've never been around horses ever. Didn't know anything. I mean, I knew that they had 4 legs and hooves and ears and a big tail, and don't get behind them is what I've always told, but I know I never ever touched horse. Like, I knew nothing about them. Never would have envisioned myself in a million years working with horses. It was not something that was ever in my agenda.
It mostly relates to balance, and occasionally you run into horses that have physical weaknesses. That's just a structural problem where you're going to say that this horse is going to be able to perform at this level. If I insist that they perform at a higher level, then I'm going to be at risk of causing some damage. And that's really not in anybody's best interest. So you're going to have to work with the limits of the ability of the horse. And then there are horses that have those mental and emotional limits as well, where if I put too much pressure on this given animal, that he just is not going to be able to deal with it. He's going to shut down, or he's going to wind up in a panic situation, and it's only going to reinforce what he's not comfortable with doing. So we have to find a way that we can work around or pass those situations and not get the horse exposed to something that they're not capable of dealing with.
So every horse has a different attitude they bring. So there's no one size fits all formula to dealing with them. Again, I'd say the core principles is trying to get them confidence and comfort, and showing them that this can do.
There have been horses that have come our way that we have not actually asked them to do any of the elements of the jousting for over a year. Again, just from the emotional feedback that you get from the horse, that this is not something that I'm going to be able to deal with in a competent fashion when there's a crowd out there, and it just was too upsetting. So we'll bring them out and do the gaming with them, and let them work on the sidelines, and be involved in a part of what's going on, and having them exposed to all the different elements, but not having any pressure on them that they actually have to go out and do something until they start settling down, and again basically getting bored with the whole situation, so that exposing them to a little bit more pressure doesn't send them over the edge.
I try and adopt the attitude, let me show you, this will be better, this will be nicer. So I try and keep this attitude of let me show you, just let me show you, it'll be fine. But there are times that I have to be stern, and it's it's like anything else. You give them rules, boundaries, and limitations, as Cesar Millan likes to say, which is a really good principle to adhere to. That same thing, you want to be soft and or forgiving, but at the same time you have to let them know that there's acceptable and unacceptable. So you try and make the acceptable very easy and the unacceptable very difficult, so that way I like the easy way better.
They're a lot like dogs. So much of their well-being is dependent on what's happening with the humans around them, that they've developed a very acute awareness as to what we're doing. Even when it sometimes doesn't look like it, they know when there are people around, and they have a very heightened awareness of what activities those people are involved in, whether it's going to be to their harm or to their benefit, and they really focus on what's happening with you. All of this lateral work is going to come in real handy when it comes time for them to actually be doing the lance passes. If I'm working my way downfield towards somebody and I notice that my horse has come off track and that we're maybe in danger of having a head-on collision down here, rather than having to set up evasive maneuvers by wrenching my horse hard right and then pulling another hard left turn so that we can continue through and be able to do the lance pass, if I can put some of that lateral work together and ask that horse to just slip off sideways as we continue down towards each other in our lance pass. Now, that doesn't disturb me, it doesn't disturb the horse overly much, and it doesn't make us waste a pass. Conforming their body the way that we want them to has some real practical considerations when it comes time to get them involved in performing and being involved in the sword fighting and the lance passes. And when you've got the lance set and ready, if you're having to pull your horse out of alignment, that definitely is going to change and affect the way that you're closing with whoever's coming at you and the way that you're going to be able to utilize your lance. So the more you can balance these horses and get them to shape up and align their bodies to your advantage so that you can use the lance effectively, the better off you're going to be. And I'll be looking for some changes of speed as we're going along here, so she doesn't figure out that her job is just to run as hard as she can from one end to the other. I might ask her to back it off here anyway along here, or add some additional speed. Oh. Or shut it down completely anywhere along the way. So again, she doesn't get the idea that she just automatically goes from point A to point B and doesn't have to listen to anything in between. Instead of sitting here as quietly as I possibly can so that I don't disturb and upset the poor horsey, I spend a lot of time, intentionally doing things that, hey, what's going on here? I wasn't expecting that, and where all of these big motions coming from, and, waving things around and moving up and down. We intentionally work with stuff where we're just getting them to be at ease, that there isn't anything that's going to cause them anything to be concerned about while they're out here. Even things that they normally wouldn't be expecting, like me standing up on top of her. And then hopping back down. When we started riding her in armor, it was originally just with the legs, and then eventually put on the breast and back, and then add the arms, and eventually the helmet, and spent some time working on the ground, doing all the things that we normally do, leading them, brushing them, cleaning them up afterwards. And the fairs work exactly the same way. We'll take them somewhere where they can get a good look what's going on without not having to be on the field and actively involved. And eventually they'll make their way out onto the field where they get to stand at one end and observe while everything is happening around them. And when they get comfortable with that idea, then we'll start actually riding them around the field during the course of the performances.
Kelly isn't one of those guys that he talks about himself. He doesn't sit there and go places and, oh yeah, I got this joust company and I got the, only money-winning draft horses in the NRHA and I'm so cool and you should, he's really to himself, and he's the only trainer I could ever think of that owns his own horses and goes out there and really works and works and works and works at trying to perfect all these techniques. And really, in a certain way, it's for nothing, in the sense that he's not going to go compete anytime soon. There's no competition he's preparing for. There's no, there's no client coming here that's gonna judge how he's riding. He's not doing it he's not getting paid to do it. He's not. But he's out there continually refining and working, and his reputation has come by people seeing.
In a lot of sports, they use muscle memory to help enhance a performance. They use a lot of visualization, where you're trying to put together a perfect performance in your head and basically go through it point by point and eliminate the little hiccups and glitches that are otherwise going to mar things. And that's all very applicable to the jousting as well, is where what we're looking for from the horses is, a very quiet, controlled, smooth, ready response, rather than constantly catching them by surprise and then, having to mash them through something and hoping for the best, or where you're actually, actively having to tussle with one another to, break through a resistant moment and finally get the follow through that you're looking for. about another fellow in Minnesota that was building armor as a hobby while he was attending school as a history major, and we started batting the idea back and forth about putting together a performance and actually being paid to be out there on horses as characters. And from there, it bumped up a notch to, well, there really isn't any reason that we couldn't make some breakaway lances and go out and do a jousting performance, and those would be our characters. We'd be knights, and we'll try and sell this. Fleshing out the joust in 1980. And by '83 we were contracting with different events, and was turning into more of an avocation and less as a speculative sort of a hobby thing. So it was in '83 that we started doing the fully armored contact jousting. The timing at the time, I think, was fortuitous that there weren't probably one or two other groups that we've heard of that were doing anything, even similar to that. And our take was that instead of using, silver spray painted sweaters and imitation armor, that we wanted to build the real armor and, use a real lance and actually, go out and take, whacks at each other. That would be the hook that would get us hired. And initially, the fellow that I was working with had a full suit of 15th century Italian armor, and I was doing a representation of a Saracen knight on one of my little Arab horses with the light chainmail and the minimal plate, and we'd go by and tag each other on the shield, and eventually I'd pull the ripcord and bail off the horse, and then we'd duke it out on the ground as a scene from the Crusades. And my take on that was that my exposure was quite a bit more than his, and a lot less defense involved. And I got to where I was looking at wearing more of the armor myself, and we then made the transition to the actual jousting tournaments where we had two fully armored knights out there.
So our show, if you take the presentation from start to finish, isn't this is exactly how a tournament would have been. It would have been just like that. No, that's not it. I mean, essentially, from my understanding and everything that I'm aware of, we've taken elements from all the different competitions that have ever existed within the scope of one big tournament and condensed it into a 30, 40-minute presentation. We do a Basson course, which is fighting with swords on horseback. That's representative of what the classic melees, where they would have a bunch of guys on field with swords, and they'd lances, and then knock the crap out of each other and take prisoners, and it would be this big Donnybrook. And then they also created formalized affairs where the object is to hit your opponent on the head and shoulders, to score points, and then the points would be tallied and a score declared. So that's kind of representative of that. Again, in an effort to sell a story from front to back, we'll embellish a little bit. We have a spot where both guys end up on the ground rolling around, which if that happened in a real tournament, they'd be clapped an iron, stripped of their armor, and booted. That's not, it's not to say it never could have happened, never did happen, but they would have just been like, great, match done, you're out of here, get, you're ejected. And then the lance passes themselves, the problem is that jousting has a 400 or 500 year history where it is evolved in so many different ways. There have been so many different styles, different types of armor, different types of everything. So again, I can't sit here and be like, oh, this is exactly how they did it. No, it's not. It's what we've ascertained from books and museums and making our best guesses at it with a little bit of what is the most practical way to go about doing this. For example, a lot of the armor we use is representative of the later 15th century and the 16th century. But the lances aren't correct. A lot of times, like the ones that I'm aware of, they would actually take multiple pieces of wood, put them together, and then band them together with leather. They actually have several examples in the Tower of London. That was one way. There was others where they would somehow hollow them out on the inside. They would do lots of different stuff. And also they were set to be weak so they could break a little bit more readily. Again, they didn't want to hurt each other either, because knights are very expensive pieces. Or soldiers, however you want to view it. So it doesn't make sense to let them kill each other. I know the lances that we use are considered medieval lances because they're consistent in their length all the way down from the tip to the end. And then lances varied in length, anywhere from 8 to 16 feet. We chose 10. There's really an art to be able to knock the crap out of each other, but do it in a way that's safe. Keep the horses safe underneath you, but then also have the horses reasonably controlled, have them look like they know what they're doing as opposed to just, oh, look, you ran a straight line, and how come that horse is not stopping and running into the net? Why is it jumping into the audience now? It's like, that takes some effort to show horses how to be calm and things of that sort. So
the emphasis is on the horses. Jousting is all very well good. It's dramatic. It's exciting. It's huge visual sort of a presentation. But the thing that I get the most satisfaction out of, and I think the guys that become involved in this and stay with it are the ones that develop an appreciation for sharing the horses with the people that are out there watching, and wanting them to become more involved with the animals themselves. And same thing applies to the performances. That martial skill is fine, and being able to accurately hit things, and being coordinated and competent, and using the weapons is fine. But again, the ones that tend to stay with it, and on this point I can speak for myself. I like the interaction, with the horse, the actual, riding part of the thing, and working at, developing the skills that they actually will be comfortable, doing things that, most horses would find, very disturbing and very unsettling, and, something that they just wouldn't tolerate. When you get, the horse that you're working with to the point where they're unconcerned about, being involved in the lance passes and being out there, underneath the swinging swords, and, guys either being knocked off of them, or, standing up and jumping off of them, or running underneath them, or, running up at them, and that, they've arrived at the point where this isn't something that they're disturbed at anymore, and that they're more interested in, just kind of pumping up and impressing the people that are out there watching and cheering for them. That's the part that appeals to me the most, is that people get a chance to come out and watch the horses.
When the art's ready and all is in preparation, let the tournament begin! Come on, son, do it with a will! Well done, Sir Maxwell and Manos arriba, Santa Perros. Shall not be here allowed continue until you agree to behave. Oh, wrong answer.
So, how was work today?
Excellent. Cool down for that show. I got no complaints.
Which is tougher, the weather or your opponent?
Usually the weather or the ground.